Good afternoon, folks. I am Russ Welser. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Ontario County, New York. For 10 years, I did cut flower peonies, and that was back in the late 1990s and the early 2020s for 10 years. It was basically about an acre and a half that I rented from a lady who had them planted. And then I was paying a high rent because I was paying the taxes on her entire 70 some acres. But nonetheless, it was still a great learning experience for me, as well as making some money for the few 3 to 4 weeks of work put into it. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. There's basically two types of peonies, the herbaceous and the trees. I'm only going to address the herbaceous. I'm not dealing with the tree ones at all. And within that herbaceous group, there's 5 main types: the singles, semi-doubles, the full doubles, the Japanese, and the anemone types. And if you look into some of the references, well, you'll see they break some of these into even more than just that. So market considerations. For those of you who are looking to get into cut flower peonies or already are, you're going to need to do some market research in advance. Basically, who is your consumer, and where is your market? Where is your market going to be? And what is the consumer demand? Who out there wants peonies, and where are they? And what are they willing to pay? And how much does it cost you to produce these flowers? And part of it's knowing your competition and where they're coming from. And who else in the area is selling the same product. So for instance, in my scenario, when I was doing cut flower peonies, I was selling to upscale florists, but they were not in New York. My upscale florists were in California. And it just happened to be that I had the connection because the owner of the property lived out in California. But at the same time, I tried to get into some of the upscale florists markets here in New York. I tried to get into one in the Syracuse area. I tried to get into one in the Watertown area. And they weren't interested because they were getting flowers coming out of Canada or else Washington or Oregon. So those were basically my competitors. But I did find it strange that Oregon and Washington was shipping flowers to New York and I'm shipping flowers to California, but that's just how it worked out. Site selection. You definitely need to have a full sun area. Requires a medium to well-drained soil. Access to irrigation, potentially, if you're putting them into like a high tunnel or even a low tunnel where you're trying to bring them on, force them earlier. The distance from the packing shed or the barn, how far away are these peonies from where you're going to need to, cool them down, store them. That's part of the consideration as well. And is the planting site next to the road? So if it's right next to the road, it's great advertisement that you got these beautiful flowers. And that's okay if you're there at that location. But if you're 12, 13 miles away, as I was, and these peonies were on a more of a back road, what I found is people would stop and go out into the field, pick flowers themselves. And the one time between the end of the fall when I last saw them to the next spring, somebody had come in and helped themselves to a dozen or more plants. They just dug them up and took off with them. So just something to think about. And how windy is the site? And the windiness is more of a concern if you're picking the softer, more open flowers, because then you might get them knocking back and forth and bruising. And when that happens, you'll get brown discoloration within the petals. And if you have a poorly drained soil, you either have to go in and do some drainage to it, put in some tile, or the other option that you have is to go in and do a raised bed, grow them up on a raised bed. So in terms of site preparation, you're looking to do this at least a year in advance. You're wanting to control those existing weeds. You have options whether or not you go in there and use a non-selective herbicide to take them out, or whether you go in there with a tarp a year in advance to take and try to remove the weeds. You're definitely going to want to do some soil testing and incorporate any required nutrients. And you're wanting to get this soil all worked up. And if it's going to sit idle, put it into a cover crop for yourself. But you're basically getting it all prepared for a planting. So planting can be done either in the fall or the spring. You read references, they always indicate that fall is the best. But when you're ordering plants, you may not be able to get them in the fall. Maybe only in the spring that you're able to get them. They should be 3 to 5 bud divisions. So they all should have 3 to 5 strong buds to them. And the other key part is plant the top of the crowns no deeper than 1 to 2 inches. So you only want 1 to 2 inches over the top of that crown. More than that, and they may not flower as well for you. Spacing within the rows, 2 to 3 feet is what the references were indicating. I prefer myself to be at least at 3 feet. Just to give the plants plenty of room and to have good air circulation around them. And then spacing between rows, again, 4 to 5 feet, but it also is going to depend upon your weed control practices and whether or not you're going to be doing some sort of a cultivation. And if so, you're going to have probably greater space between your rows in doing that. So that just gives you an idea of the spacing. And again, keep in mind that your harvest won't begin until, year 3 or 4. You got to let this plant get well established and strong enough to begin to provide you with enough flowers that you can harvest them off and still not damage and weaken the plant. Fertilization. I thought this was rather interesting. I found a reference from this company out of Holland, and their recommendation was 134 pounds of nitrogen, 89 pounds of phosphorus, 200 pounds of potassium, and 89 pounds of magnesium per acre. And Kansas State, in their information, I just reported that, 43 to 87 pounds each of NP and K per acre per year. And the old extension bulletin 893 says 1 handful of 10-10-10 or 5-10-5 per plant. And that was my fertilizing method right there, was a handful around each one of these plants. So, what you find with any of our cut flowers, oftentimes there aren't specifics, and it's going to vary with your soils in terms of how much fertilizer you need. So do have a fertilizer, a test done a year in advance so you can get it incorporated in. They did agree on that you ought to do a split fertilizer application. And basically they're trying to split this nitrogen is what it amounts to. Half of it they're putting on at the time the plant is emerging, and the other half either after flowering or in the fall. And the other option would be with that second application to apply a quarter after flowering and then a quarter in the fall. Now, I must tell you my experience. Uh, what I noticed, because I didn't fertilize every year, and what I noticed and was that the years that I fertilized, the vase life of those flowers was lower. Usually, it was a day or two less than when I didn't fertilize, and that was just my experience. I have no way of backing it up to say, "Yep, you're right." That was just what I observed. So take it for what it's worth. Just something for you to think about as well when you're doing your fertilizations. And again, my fertilization was done in the spring of the year. So maybe if it would have been done after flowering, maybe I wouldn't get that problem the following year. So uh, just something to think about, and some more experimentation on the part of some of the growers. Weed control strategies. You definitely need to control the weeds. So whether or not you're going to be doing it by, cultivation, whether or not you're going to be using some herbicides, whether or not you're going to be using some mulches, or, doing some hand weeding, and maybe it's a little bit of all of these perhaps. I would not be using one of the fabric type mulches at all, uh, or even a plastic mulch. You're going to be using some sort of wood chip, straw, or something of that nature. Uh, again, I would discourage the straw as well, because it provides a environment for the mice, and then you're going to have damage done to your plants from all the mice. So disbudding. Uh, we do this. This is where we remove all of the side buds and leave the one dominant bud, and it's just so we get a larger single flower. And it's done as soon as those side buds start showing up, and you're literally using your thumb and forefinger to snap them out or roll them out. Depending on your market, some markets may want those side buds, so uh, you can look into that as well. But it's mainly to get a larger single flower. So harvesting, this is always an interesting part, is understanding, the right bud stage to harvest. And it varies with each cultivar and with your respective market. So if you're having to ship flowers, you're going to want them in a tighter bud than if you're just sending them over to the local florist. And the other thing that's going to vary too is uh, what these flowers are going to be. Are you sending them off to someone who's drying them? If so, they're going to want maybe a little more open flower. It all depends on how far away they got to go. So with this bud stage, for some, it's as soon as you see some petal color, that would be the stage, what we call stage 1. Others, when the calyx is loose and revealing some color, that would be stage 2. And for others, not until the top petals are loose, and that would be the stage 3. And the so-called marshmallow stage that everybody seems to talk about would be roughly a 2.5. And we'll see in some of my later pictures some buds that I'll point out to you, and where their development is. But with some of the varieties, if you were to pick them in stage 1, they would never open up. So for my first year or two, I just floundered around and learned trial and error. My first year, I cut this red variety as soon as it started showing some color, and sure enough, not a one of them opened up. But we'll talk a little more about some of those. And again, this is new plantings. Once again, you're not going to begin to harvest them for 3 or 4 years. You're just wanting to make a good, strong plant. So young or weak plants, you can harvest up to, 1/3 of all the stems. When you have a good, strong plant, you could harvest up to half of all the stems. And part of it too is going to depend upon the stem length. If you're just marketing them all to someone who wants them as to dry, you can probably get by with a rather short, 6-inch stem or even less. So then you could even probably cut a few more flowers because you're not removing much, if any, of the leaf material. And at the time that you cut the stems, you're also removing the lower leaves. You're just stripping them off as you do this. So the stem length, I should back up and say the stem length oftentimes is somewhere in that 20 to 24 inches is quite often the stem length that we put on them. But again, it's going to depend on your market. And oftentimes they're either bunched in bunches of 5 or bunches of 10 if you're going to market them. And then storage is real important. So the references all look and say, 32 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 to 80% relative humidity. And we're doing this as a dry storage. They're not being placed in any sort of water. They're not being, they're being laid on their sides. Okay, so they're being laid in their sides in the cooler. No pre-treatment recommendation for them. The research has been done where they took some various peony varieties after cutting, stuck them into water, some into water with preservative, let them suck up and soak up good, and then put them into storage, and then looked at them a week or 2 weeks later to see if there was any difference between them and those that did not get those treatments. And for the most part, it didn't make any difference if they had gotten that initial pre-treatment before going into storage. I say that, but at the same time, there were a few of the varieties that did respond in a positive fashion. So unless you have those specific varieties and want to treat them differently, it's just not worth the additional time and effort. These peonies can be stored in this way for 2 to 4 weeks, and some up to 6 weeks or even a little longer. And again, it's definitely a varietal thing. Open flowers placed in water with preservative and stored 1 to 2 weeks had a vase life of 5 to 7 days, and that's equal to a properly stored dry bud for that same length of time. And that research was done through Kansas State. But so if you do have open flowers and you have a local market that you can take them to, you can still store them as an open flower. If the flowers get past you and you're not getting them picked at the bud stage, this is an alternative for you. Vase life of flowers, the average length of time is 3 to 5 days. Fresh versus stored, there's little difference between them in terms of opening or in terms of the vase life. Floral preservative added to the vase water, this is after it comes out of storage, will improve the length of time in some of these cultivars. And then and that was work done by Penn State. And then Kansas State says vase life is 5 to 10 days. So then it's like, well, okay, folks, well, what the heck's going on here? Why does one say 3 to 5, and another is way up there to 5 to 10? Part of it's going to be potentially a difference in cultivars, also potentially a difference in the bud stage that they might have harvested them in, as well as the storage conditions. So my experience in how I handled my flowers, um, you know, 5 days was a pretty good vase life on average for most of them. But yes, you can definitely get on some varieties, 7 to 10 days, no problem. So I would say, you got that whole range of, from 3 all the way up to 10, depending on the variety of peony that you have. So drying, the most common way is just hanging the stems upside down in a dark, warm area. Whites never do very well just because they turn brown and they just don't look all that appealing. At least that's my opinion. Freeze drying is another option. It's very expensive, but the flowers do look fantastic when they go through that process. And the other sort of time-consuming method is what we call the covered method. This is where you're using some sort of a drying agent, such as a silica gel or a borax or some sort of a sand, and you're covering over the flower and getting it in between each one of the petals, and then drying them in that way. And so one of my folks that I sold to, she was in New York City, and that's exactly what she was doing, is she was drying them for her dried flower arrangements, and she was using this covered method. And my very first year, when I didn't know what I was doing and was picking my flowers way too late to be shipped or anything, um, I was sending them to another person up in the Rochester area, and she was freeze drying them. And the next year, her freeze dryer broke down, and she said it was too expensive to fix and new ones were too expensive and she wasn't going to do it. So that was the end of selling them to a freeze dryer. Insect pests. There really aren't too many insect pests that will bother the peonies. Thrips may be an issue at times. That was definitely one of my issues with several of the varieties. The Japanese beetles and the rose Schaefers are rarely a problem. And a lot of folks always think, well, ants are an issue. Well, the ants aren't an issue if in fact you cut the flowers in that bud stage, because the ants aren't inside the flower. Once the flower opens up and you have ants around, yes, you could have some ants and flowers, and then that could potentially be a problem if you're selling them at the farmer's market, if you'd picked them at that time. So this is what some thrips damage would look like. This is a bud that's trying to open up, and that's about as far as it's going to open. And it's just all the petals are thickened and rough colored, may even be a little brownish from all of the feeding from the thrips. But that's what thrips damage would look like on the flower bud. With diseases, botrytis is the main issue. You could make a fungicide application in the spring when the shoots are first emerging, if necessary, and then you would need to repeat it, every 7 to 14 days if you had a serious problem. Fungicide applications for the botrytis will also help to other fungal diseases like red spot, leaf blotch. Red spot, leaf blotch are one and the same. It's just some different symptoms. We also have a few bacterial leaf spots. There's various root and stem rots, of course, and there are a few viruses. But in general, peonies are pretty pest-free plants, especially if you've put them in a good site. Where you run into these root rots and stem rots and things of that nature is where we have wet soil conditions, and we get rotting to start to occur usually. My plants never got sprayed in the 10 years that I was watching over them. Uh, Botrytis, I had very little of the botrytis. I had a lot more leaf blotch. But the leaf blotch, as bad as it may look, it doesn't always be all that detrimental to the plant. So this is what botrytis looks like on that flower head. And resource for specific pest control products, I'm going to refer you to this lovely publication right here, the 2024-2025 New York, New England Management Guidelines for Greenhouses, Floriculture, and Herbaceous Ornamentals. So this is one of Cornell University's management guidelines. So you get in there and it'll give you all the specifics of insect disease. So early season peonies, we kind of break peonies down into early, mid, and late varieties. In that acre and a half that I was dealing with, the individual had planted over 60 different varieties of peonies. I think she put them in there just to trial some and see how they were doing, because there'd be 5 of this and 10 of that and 20 of this and 30 of that. It didn't make it the easiest to try to do anything with some of these flowers, but so this is one of the better earlier whites called Charlie White. Charles White. A nice, full flower. And the thing too is most of the florists, again, it depends on what they're using the flowers for. During my time, it was basically the peonies were the wedding flower. And so they wanted mainly whites and pinks, and reds were not at all of interest. So this was a nice big white one. Here's Duchess de Namur, and this one has a smaller flower bud to it, and the flower itself is a little bit smaller as well. But it produced a lot of stems. Festiva Maxima, this one has a little bit of red tinge to it usually, not always, and it's also very fragrant. The other thing about this one, for sure, the vase life on this guy is 3 to 5 days. That's all you're going to get out of it. This is Miss America, and she looks nice, but wasn't one of my big sellers. But again, that was back then, and now is now, so now it could be a hot topic. I don't know. Coral Charm. Everybody seems to want right now this Coral Charm. So I had a few of these, and I shipped them out to the upper class florists out there in California. And after next time he placed an order, he told me, do not send me any more of those stinky, fishy smelling peonies. And they do. They have for some, it's an offensive odor. And so he didn't want those things. And there's Coral Supreme, very similar. This is Mons Jewel Ellie. This is a lovely pink. And the 2 buds, one on each side, those are going to be the side buds that just weren't removed from this particular flower. And yet some florists may want that to add some added diversity to the flower arrangement. Duchess d'Orleans, again, it's a smaller bud, smaller flower. This is Fairy's Petticoat. Fairy's Petticoat is a fairly large flower, um, a light pinkish white type of a flower. It would be sold as a pink. This is the one that as soon as you saw color on that bud, you better get it picked. Because if you didn't pick it then, and you come back tomorrow, it's going to be an open flower. This is Adulis superba, and this is a fragrant pink. What I didn't like about this flower is it had a fair number of crooked stems versus nice straight stems. So that would be the other thing you might be looking for with your peonies is nice, strong, straight stems. This is Mr. Ed. This is another early pink one. You can see a small brown bud on the top of that peony flower. That is not botrytis. That's just a flower that has blown, has shot. So either it got exposed to too much cold or got too hot too fast. You know, the flower blasted. That's what happened to it. It just blasted. This is Red Charm, and everybody loved Red Charm. It is a huge, huge flower bud. I kid you not. That flower bud is all of 2 to 2.5 inches in diameter. And then it opens up into this gorgeous bomb style, peony. The problem that I had with this particular variety is that when I put it into the cooler and took it out, stuck it in a vase of water, it opened up and the petals all dropped off. This one for me did not like being placed in the cooler. I don't know if it was just my experience with it or if that's just this particular variety, but that was my experience with it. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous red. Moving on to some mid-season peonies. Here we have Florence Nichols, fantastic light pink blush sort of a peony. This is Gardenia. Gardenia is a shorter peony. It doesn't have a big long stem to it. It starts out as this nice white, creamy white, but then it turns to a sort of a blushy pink color as it ages. This is Gay Paris. Interesting sort of bicolor. The florists have a hard time, trying to figure out where to put this thing in their arrangements. And it is a smaller bud and flower to it than some of the others. This is a bowl of cream, another white one with a fair amount of stamens to her. This is Walter Faxon. This is a lovely light pink peony, full double. This is Top Brass. This is a goofy looking peony with this sort of a pink top notch to it. And it'll vary from flower to flower. Not all of them will have that top pink part to it. And it varies from year to year as to how well it develops. My understanding for this flower is if it was grown in a warmer winter environment, it wouldn't be this way at all. It would be totally different. It's not at all. This one I was in the planting as well. It is one that I definitely would not plant, but I would plant its sister seedling here. This is Raspberry Sunday. It's sort of this marble light to dark pink to creamy white to some yellow in it. You know, it's supposed to represent just that, a raspberry sundae. This flower is extremely fragrant. This flower will last in that cooler for all of 6 weeks or more and still open up and be a respectable flower. So I had fantastic luck with this particular variety. Pink Radiance, another lovely light pink variety. This is Mrs. FDR, and this one is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I didn't have enough of these. I could have sold a whole lot more, but this was a beautiful, beautiful mid-season light pink variety. This is Pink Chiffon. Again, it's a different style. This is more of the like a Japanese type of style. I didn't have much of a market for these, nor did she have a lot of them. These were the ones that she had 5 plants of this and maybe 10 of that. This is the Westerner, another one very similar to it. You see the browning on the petals? That's actually some botrytis on that petal. And this was Athena. Athena was interesting in that those outer petals, it was very papery like, so it was a different style altogether. In that upper left there, you see this peony bud that's all browned out and bent over. That's botrytis. Okay, this is Seashell. This was a gorgeous single for me. And again, I didn't have a market for singles, but what I did with this one is just before it started to petals to fully separate and open up, I picked it, stripped the foliage, hung it upside down, dried it, and it turned out like it was a little rose all dried out. So I used it as a dried flower. This is Do Tell, another one of those sort of Japanese oriented style ones. This is a red one called Shawnee Chief. It has sort of a more of a purpley haze to it than being true red, but it does have that purpley haze to it. This is Felix Kraus. This is one of, I consider one of the better reds. That flower bud in that picture, you see how much red is there? If you were to pick that at that stage, it likely would not open up. You got to wait. The reds I found, you have to wait until that calyx is soft and the top petals are all loose on them. This is Felix Supreme. This is another very good red. This was probably one of my favorites for the red varieties. This is Big Ben. Big Ben has a very long stem to it. You could get, if you needed to, you probably could get a 30 to 36-inch stem off on this plant, and it was very fragrant. So that was the other plus for it, its fragrance. This is Buckeye Bell. Here's Carl Rosenfeld. You know, you read in the literature and everybody says this is a great cut flower. Well, it may be, but this is the one that I had the most problem with the thrips on. And personally, I didn't like the flower. Moving on to those late season peonies. This is Avalanche. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous white. This is Duchess d'Orleans. This is going to be a little smaller flower than some of the other nice full doubles. The bud right there in the bottom center, you know, that would be like a stage 3 flower where the calyxes are loose and the top petals are starting to loosen up. And the one that's dead center above it, that one's definitely probably a 3.5 to maybe a 4 stage with it. Henry Sass, another gorgeous white. This is Jan van Leeuwen, and this was a white single. This was a very tall plant. Again, this is one that you could easily get probably a 2.5 to 3 foot stem on it if you needed to. It was a gorgeous single. I just didn't have a market for it, but it was a fantastic plant. And you know, the center there is made up of a whole bunch of little petaloids versus it being, you know, a bunch of stinky anthers. So this one, you know, didn't stink up the place. This is Ruth Cobb's. Again, another nice pink here. Nick's Shaler. This is a nice blush. What I found with my Nick Shalers is sometimes I had a fair number of crooked stems. And that flower bud right there is the stage of which I would pick that flower at. So again, that's going to be a stage 3 flower. Probably could pick it a little bit earlier and it would still hold up. But, and again, for me, I was shipping them. So I have to have a fairly tight flower bud. Alexander Fleming, another gorgeous pink. Myrtle Gentry, this is a sort of a blush. And you can see we got buds there of all varying development here. So the one that's the big round one up towards the top, you know, looks like a marshmallow. You know, everybody hears about this marshmallow stage, and that's what I always thought. Well, that's the marshmallow stage when they're really soft and they're almost ready to pop open the petals. I always figured, well, that's the marshmallow stage. Well, that's more like stage 6, just before they pop out and open up, which is okay for some markets, you know, especially if you're just taking flowers to the local market for yourself. James Pillow. This was a excellent pink. Big flower, big buds. Most of the time, these later flowers are better quality than some of those earlier flowers by far. So it's always nice to have some of these. And it'll also, from those early ones to the late ones, we're only talking a difference of at most probably 2 weeks, between some of these. But again, it does prolong your harvest time. This is Sarah Bernhardt, and everybody and their brother wanted Sarah Bernhardt. It does have a big flower to it. It does have a fragrance, but it's not one that I enjoy. The thing that I found with Sarah Bernhardt is that I could not store it for more than 2 weeks in my cooler without it crapping out and the vase life just being, 3 days or less on it. But it is a gorgeous flower. And it's well known in the florist trade as well, because it's just been around forever. And so there you have it. There's a final product. Those are some of the flowers, the peonies. This would be raspberry sundae that's intermixed within everything else. So down on the bottom, you've got, every one of those bigger flowers on the left and in the center. Some look almost a light pink. Some are a darker pink. Those are all the raspberry sundaes, but this is where my flowers are going, to these sort of upscale florists that was doing these sorts of designs for various clientele, including the Hollywood elites. So with that said,
thanks, Russ. There are some questions in the some